don't you just tell the audience briefly, what's the mission of Midnight Run?
Well, I mean, it's multi-part. First of all, it's just obviously getting things that are needed to people who are without housing, getting food, clothing, blankets, toiletries. Those are all things that are needed. But the other thing that's needed is friendship. I mean, I was homeless for myself for a couple of years, and yes, I remember being cold, and I remember being hungry, and I remember the horror of being dirty. But I also remember the feeling that I'm not part of society. People walking past you like you're not even there. My best memories of Midnight Run from when I was homeless or when I've been doing Midnight Run as an employee is the standing around, having a cup of coffee at the end. The stuff's been given out. It's about that kind of human communication. And also the third part of our mission is kind of opening people's eyes. We take a lot of youth groups, a lot of young people, and we go in and say, when I'm going in, people are a little apprehensive. And on the way back, they're always saying something like, wow, they're just like us, which meant they didn't think that beforehand. So those are the three parts: the physical taking care of needs, the letting people know that someone cares, just coming out and say, hi, we're coming from a community. We have a little more than we need, and we'd like to share it. And opening the eyes of the people who are actually doing it. All those three things are kind of integral and have to be kind of meshed together.
And what are some of the changes you saw in the homeless population this past year during COVID in New York?
Well, it's been a kind of a rotating thing. The initial part, it was really those first late March, April, the city was totally shut down. Everything was shut down. Most of the soup kitchens weren't doing anything, no handout or anything. That was just, and people who were homeless did not want to go into a shelter situation. I mean, so suddenly there were all these people sleeping on the streets who hadn't been sleeping on the streets before because they were getting out of the shelter. And there was no one to give them food or clothing. One of the things that one of the homeless people that had been out for a long time said to me was, I always knew I could at least find a way to get clean. And all of a sudden the bathrooms are closed. The public showers at the parks and stuff were closed.
Right.
And he found himself filthy. Luckily, we had just gotten it right before the pandemic, nothing unrelated, a pallet full of these washcloths that are, they're kind of like a giant hand towelette. And we were giving those out, people were so happy just to get that, just so they could feel a little cleaner. As things progressed, maybe some of those things got a little less dire. Some of the soup kitchens opened up and at least did, handout bags. But I still think that the part of the companionship, people were, lots of people felt isolated over the last year. If you were already in a part of the population that was more socially distanced to start with, you felt it even more.
Mm-hmm.
Which is one of the reasons I think that actually the street people we saw seemed to have the least incidence of COVID of anybody I know, because they were already socially distanced. And of course we had different needs. I mean, I've been here for about 30 years, and up until the last year, I never gave out masks. We occasionally had hand sanitizer, but it wasn't considered a necessary thing. And all of a sudden, those became, we've probably given out 25,000 masks in the last year, at least.
Mm-hmm.
So I think things changed for everybody. And unfortunately, some things had to change that, as you know, and you and your sister and a bunch of people from St. James have done these little mini runs, we had to do, it's a little bit harder to do all the clothing, so we just had to concentrate on the socks, the underwear, the t-shirts. It's hard to keep distance when you're do soup. So we were just doing lunch bags. But I can pretty much guarantee everybody's like, maybe they would have loved a choice of shirts. Maybe they would have loved some hot soup, but as the phrase goes, it's better than the blank. The not coming would have been the part that really would have been, I think, hard on people. So I think people were very, very grateful that we were doing what we could.
Right.
While a lot of groups were just, I understand we're just doing nothing. I mean, a lot of some of the soup kitchens have just been closed. Some of the other programs are doing just virtual, which is, if you're on the streets, is not exactly very helpful.
So where are we now? I looked on your calendar and I see people signing up for breakfast runs and midnight runs. Are you starting to resume normal schedules?
We're better than we were. It's nowhere near what the norm was. I mean, before COVID, on a weekend night, we might have 5 to 7 groups going out, each doing a different set. Last weekend was our busiest so far in the last year. We had 5 on Friday, but we only had 2 on Saturday that week, and we have a couple of breakfast runs a weekend rather than 4 or 5. But it's a lot better than it was during the early periods when it was basically virtually no groups other than just the mini groups that were just kind of driving around the spots where people sleep. At least we can say, okay, tonight, if you're anywhere in the West 50s or West 40s, we're going to be at those stops, which is nice to be able to give people some definite places we're going to be, which can't really do when you're going out with a pair of 1 or 2 people and you can't tell 50 people to show up at a place where you're going to have, and you've got 30 lunches.
Right.
So now at least it's better. I'm hoping that the fall will be much better as more people get vaccinated and things kind of come back on. Of course, now we're going into what's normally our slowest period, the summer. So it's kind of I'm also hoping that some groups that don't normally do summer runs may decide, well, we weren't able to do a winter or spring run. Maybe we can do a summer run now that our team is vaccinated.
What about actual numbers on the street? I mean, there was, a number of press articles about using hotels that were empty to house homeless.
That did happen to an extent, but most of that was actually trying to space out people in the shelters. So most of the people that got moved into those hotels were people that were already in the shelter system more than people coming off the streets. There were some, I've met some people that, I know some people that were on the streets that were moved into hotels. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I mean, there's going to have to be funding for it from someplace,
right,
for it to keep up. I'm hoping that it doesn't end up with people back on the streets, but I'm hoping, but I'm not necessarily hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Any closing thoughts?
No, I mean, I just want to say to people of St. James that, beyond, there were 5 or 6 families that have gone, it's just little small teams. But there are other people that help make the lunches and people that helped, make the toiletry kits and all that. And you're one of the groups that really did never stop. Even, before anybody was vaccinated and stuff, there were, Cheryl was sending me a list and there would be like, 3 or 4 groups, in the course of each month that were going out. It might've been a little mini run, but I guarantee you every person who saw that mini run was really happy to see them. So I really do appreciate the efforts of everybody at St. James over the last year. The hardest year of midnight run to me, so.
I bet. So just in closing, one line of introduction about who you are and what your role is at CAM.
I'm Dale Williams. I'm the executive director of Midnight Run for the last 30 years. Before that, I was a homeless person who met Midnight Run on the streets. So,
okay. Thank you very much for spending the time with us.